how's it going? Welcome to No Fear, the podcast where we explore courage and fear. I am Pete Pepe, one of the co-founders of 3777. Today with me, my good mates, the other co-founders of 3777, Iiro and Mr. Jeb Corliss. Today, the subject matter is a deep one, as they usually are. It is actually the fear of failing. It has such a negative connotation. We're going to dig deep into this and really explore what it means to fail and the fear or overcoming the fear of failure. I'm going to hand it over to my good partner, Iiro.
Yeah, I want to ask a question from all of you. Like, which one is bigger, your passion for success or your fear of failure? Because how do you define the failure in the end? In my opinion, if you try something, you learn something, and you don't give up and you continue trying, I don't really think there is a failure.
Well, look, it's an interesting thing. So let's get the three of us get into this right away. We're going to do a deep dive on this. I think it's such an interesting subject that you brought up in a sense that it has such a negative connotation, failure. But I think it's one of those things that in a certain mindset, you can take that negative aspect of failure and remold it and turning it into something powerful that is actually helpful and becomes such a tool to use. So
absolutely. I mean, I think failure is learning, and the more things we learn, the more experience we get, and that enables the success. So, Chip, like you are our superstar and guest and only guest that we've had on this show. So we're gonna I want to ask you a question. With all the careers, all the things that you've done, and you've had some heavy hits, has there been a moment when you realized that the failure has actually been a blessing in disguise?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think that my failures have probably been the most important things that have happened in my life, because I've realized I've only learned, genuinely learned, and the things that have genuinely made me change and grow were the things that would be deemed failures. That's what actually was the catalyst to push me forward. Anytime I was successful in something, I didn't really learn much from it. But there was one particular instance, and it was the very beginning of my base jumping career. I just started out. I only had just under 40 base jumps, and I still wasn't even thinking about doing it professionally, really. I didn't know I would be able to make a living from it, and it was just, at the time, more of a hobby, a passion, just something I really wanted to do. And I was in South Africa. I was visiting friends, and we were jumping off a bunch of different objects, and I had a really, really bad accident. I hit a waterfall. I broke my back in 3 places, all my ribs, left foot, right knee.
How do you hit the waterfall?
Well, so basically I was doing a slider down jump. The waterfall is 300 feet tall. I was still very new. I didn't really have that much skill yet. And when I stepped off the waterfall, I dipped a shoulder. So my left shoulder dropped. And as that happened, it created an asymmetrical opening, meaning I loaded one side of the canopy first, which was the left side, which forced my parachute to open with a 90-degree left-hand turn, meaning I opened exactly to the left from where I was supposed to be flying. And that
out of nowhere, a waterfall.
Yeah, well, I mean, I knew a waterfall was there. I knew that before jumping off, and I knew that if I got a 90 left, it would be bad. So the instant it happened, I actually think I kind of forced it to happen, because it's one of those things where, you're driving a car, you look someplace, you go that place. I was like, don't get a 90 left, don't get 90 left, don't get 90 left. And I kind of gave myself a 90 left. And when I got it, I instantly saw the waterfall, and I instantly knew, this was the worst thing, the worst case scenario. This was as big a failure as you could get in the base jumping environment. And I knew, okay, I need to get away from this thing. I grab a rear riser on my right-hand side, trying to turn the canopy away. And I actually pull it, and I'm turning away from the waterfall. And at a certain point, I'm like, I think I made it, because I'm looking away, and I think I'm good. And then all of a sudden, I feel something touching the back of my legs, and it's the waterfall. And as it's touching the back of my legs, I just feel it suck me in. And as it sucks me in, it collapses the parachute, and I actually end up behind the waterfall. And I actually watch the waterfall go out in front of me. And as the waterfall goes out in front of me, I look down, and I just see ledges of rocks. And I end up impacting the first ledge of rocks in a sitting position, which broke my spine 3 places. It cracked teeth. And then I kind of fell forward, and I impacted a second time, which crushed ribs and hyperextended my right knee and broke I didn't even realize it until later, but it broke my ankles as well. And then I fell an unknown distance into the pool of water underneath. Luckily, there weren't rocks there because I hit head first and it would have killed me for sure. So I hit it, the waterfall pushed me under, and the experience was incredibly brutal, very painful. And in any normal kind of person, if I had a normal kind of mindset and a normal kind of way of seeing things, it would have been a career-ending injury. It would have been the end of jumping for any sane, rational human being. And, you know, the rescue ended up taking 9 hours. It was long and brutal, and I was eaten alive by animals for like 3 hours while I was waiting for rescue. There were these
Lions?
no, they were little freshwater crabs that lived in the water that were just chewing on the open wounds that I got shredded as I hit the waterfall. So it was an incredibly horrific experience that I could never have imagined having. Like it was way worse than I could ever. I could never have thought something like that would occur, or it would be that bad or that painful, and that it would take that long to recover. And, you know, when I was in the emergency room, the doctor in the emergency room comes to me and he's like, you know, he was telling me kind of like the laundry list of my injuries. It was after they did the MRIs and all the x-rays and stuff. And he's just like going through like how bad it is and like what it was going to take to kind of recover from it. And he said something, he's like, you know, I bet you're never going to do that again. Which, you know, most normal human beings would respond with, I'm not going to do that again. But I looked at him and I said, you know, there's only two things in the world that would prevent me from base jumping. And he's like, what's that? And I'm like, quadriplegia or death. And he's like, okay, well, I guess you'll do it again, you know. But what was fascinating is, you know, I'm laying in a hospital in South Africa, you know, staring at a ceiling for months. I mean, it was a long time. I was there for a long time all by myself. I had different people coming through my room because I was in like a common room, but I was in there longer than everyone else. So people would come and leave and come and leave, and I was just there. But, you know, it's interesting because I got home from that experience. I had to be air vac back to the United States. And then I went through another like rehab and stuff while I was there. And I was, you know, trying to figure out like what was going to happen with my life and what I was going to do. And I ended up licensing that footage to a TV show called Real Sports. Or not Real Sports, called Real TV. The show is called Real TV. And I ended up licensing footage to them, and they paid me pretty good for it, along with a bunch of other footage that I got from that same trip. And then, you know, from there, you know, I'm like, it was a decent amount of money, and it gave me enough to where I could quit my job. I was working for my parents at the time as a graphic artist, which is a job I hated. I didn't like it at all. And I really wanted to just base jump. And I'd gotten a big enough chunk of money to where I could go on probably like maybe 5 or 6 more trips, you know? And I'm like, well, you know, I licensed this footage, so maybe I'll go on those trips and I'll get some more footage, and then I could maybe license that. And what's interesting is I ended up licensing that footage for the next decade. And it was weird because I go on other trips and I do other things, but no one ever wanted to pay me for any of that. Like I jumped off the Eiffel Tower, I jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge, I jumped off, you know, all these things that I thought were going to be like, oh, you know, people are going to love this. People are going to want to see this. But no one gave a shit about any of that. It just so happened that they just kept buying my accident over and over and over. I had one producer buy it 3 different times for 3 different shows. And I even asked him at one point, he's like, isn't this getting kind of boring? He's like, no, it's great. We have new audiences all the time. It's a wonderful story. And what I found out is that, you know, people love watching other people get destroyed. They love to watch accidents. They love watching people get hurt. But what they like even more than watching a person get hurt is they like seeing them get hurt and completely demolished and then get back up and do it again. Yeah. That was the story. Yeah. The story of that accident wasn't just that I got hurt. It was that I got hurt. I then went and recovered and then went right back to doing it. And what was fascinating is that they would buy the Golden Gate Bridge and they would buy the Eiffel Tower footage and they would buy my other footage in conjunction to that story. So they would show the failure, they would show the getting hurt, they would show the getting messed up, and then they would buy the other footage to show that I came back to do it again. And I think what was fascinating is I didn't realize this till many, many years later, that moment was literally the most important moment of my life. It allowed me to quit a job I absolutely hated and despised and wasn't any good at. You know, it was pure nepotism. The only reason I had a job was because my parents gave it to me, and I was terrible at it. And it makes you feel bad to do making money at something you suck at, you know? And it gave me the opportunity to earn a living doing something I genuinely loved. And without that accident, like if I had not hit that waterfall, I would never have been able to become a professional base jumper. There's no question. Selling that footage and licensing that footage gave me the finances to continue traveling the world, to continue jumping. It gave me the connections to the producers that would give me work in the future for other things. And it created the entire foundation for my entire career. And now looking back, it was not a failure at all. Now, at the time, I felt like a failure. At the time, it seemed like I had failed. But as it turns out, that was the actual catalyst to my entire career spanning 30 years. And it's funny because I look throughout my life and I start realizing that, you know, the things that seemed the worst, like the darkest and the most brutal and the most violent and the most painful, like the suffering, turned out to be the things that helped me grow, helped me become something new. It's where I learned. That's where I actually learned something. You know, I have thousands of jumps that were successful. I didn't learn anything from any of them other than how to have a good time. And having fun is great. There's nothing wrong with having fun. That's good. But I didn't actually grow from any of it. What I grew from was the pain. What I grew from was the suffering. What I grew from was the actual getting destroyed and broken. And that failure, another thing. So not only did it give me a career and I earned a living from that for a very long time, which then kind of was the foundation of everything else, it also saved my life in the long run. Because what happened is in that failure, I learned what it meant to make a mistake and how serious it can be and how much it can hurt and how it can really, I mean, people don't understand how valuable being able to get out of bed and go into the bathroom by yourself is, right? That's just something we all think is just a given. You're supposed to be able to get out of bed and you're supposed to be able to go to the bathroom by yourself. And that's just how it is. But when it's taken from you, when you are literally crippled and you literally cannot move and you're trapped in a bed, and in order to go to the bathroom, you have to ring a little bell. And then a person comes in with a little bedpan, and then they have to lift you off the bed, and your back is broken, so it causes extreme pain. And then they stick the bedpan under you, and then they have to stand there with you while you take a poop, you know? And it's really gross, and it smells, and it's horrible. And you can see that they're not enjoying themselves because it's not a fun experience, not for them, not for you, not for anyone. And for me, it was a very mortifying, very unpleasant experience. I really didn't like it. If hell existed, it would involve bedpans. I hate them with a passion. Like it's upsetting. It causes a visceral like thing just talking about it. That's how upsetting it is. So I do not like them. And I've unfortunately experienced them multiple times. That wasn't my only one. But the concept was that I the first day that I was able to get out of bed by myself and go to the bathroom by myself, I was so happy. Like it was just this absolute magical moment. And it's weird to all of a sudden, you know, appreciate something that's so simple. And even to this day, I mean, hell, this is how many years later, 2 decades, 2.5 decades later, when I go to the bathroom in the morning, it's just the best thing ever. I'm like, I walk in the bathroom, just like, this is amazing. I sit down and I was like, yes. It's like, and it's fascinating because it kind of helped me appreciate the simple things of life better. And beyond that, it also made me realize that I need to be much more careful when I'm base jumping. All right, I need to put more thought into it.
Yeah, in a sport that is the most deadly in the world, like the failure is like real consequences.
Well, and it's not just the thing. I always thought that death was the worst case scenario, but you don't know what happened. You're dead. You don't even know you're dead. But when you get really badly injured, and it takes you years to recover from it, and then you never really. I'm still injured from that. Like my back, I've been in constant pain since that injury. My back has never gotten better. I'm in pain sitting here right now from that injury. So when that happens to you, you start to, the reason why I say that accident saved my life is because it made me start approaching base jumping where I started evaluating risk much better. So one, it created a career for me out of a career-ending injury, which is crazy. It made me appreciate my life and just very simple things on a level that I couldn't have without it. And then it also made me really focus on, okay, do not fuck up right now. Because if you do, you're going to be back with the bedpan, and that bedpan terrifies me, right? So I'm like, I do not want the bedpan again. So it really did make me take things more seriously. And I think in the long run, one of the things that helped save me was that it gave me a more meticulous approach to try to avoid the bedpan.
Right. I want to ask you a question. This, again, I like to dig into your psyche when you get into this. Is if again, looking at the subject of failure and the fact that you've fucking failed
badly,
and again, and thank God you survived. But when you look back at that failure, when you were recovering, you're looking up at the fucking ceiling, and you're psychologically, how, again, this is one of those injuries where most people go, fuck it, I'm not going to base jump again. I'm going to, get a fucking tricycle or whatever they're going to do.
Another job,
So what, from that failure, then did you learn that actually kept and drove you to continue to do what you were doing? And not just continue doing what you were doing. You kept taking it up a notch. You kept taking it up another notch. It's not like you just said, I'm just going to do that. You have taken it to an extreme. So how did you build off of that failure?
This is the thing. I was so passionate about what I was doing that it wasn't a question that I would continue doing it. So what's fascinating is again, I always say you have to find something that's so important to you that you're willing to sacrifice everything for it. It's about finding that passion, finding that thing that gives your life purpose. And at that point, base jumping had become my purpose. It was the reason I existed. So my mindset was the reason that I was going to rehab, the reason I was trying to fix my spine, the reason I was trying to learn to walk again, the reason I was going through the suffering to bring my body back to a place where it would function again was so I could jump again. Everything was about getting back to jumping. It's all I wanted to do. It's all I cared about. So jumping, that passion for that thing, right? That activity, that whatever you want to call it, sport, flying, philosophy, pick a word to describe what base jumping is. And I wanted that so bad that's what forced me to actually recover. That's what motivated me to recover. That's what made me want to recover. And without the base jumping, I probably wouldn't have recovered because I wouldn't have cared why go through all this pain and suffering. So I think that's a real important thing to understand is that, the accident was what it was. And the reason that I wanted to recover was so I could get back to what actually caused the accident in the first place, which is strange, but that was the motivation.
But I think it's also important, like when you talk about failure and how you were talking about it, like I don't think the blessing was obvious and when it happened to you. And then only through time, like it's like most of the things in failures are horrible things and they happen. Like, like the physical pain that you had to go, you lose a company, you fail, your relationship goes down. So when it happens, it's difficult. But only thing that I've noticed in life that if you give things enough time, it does give most of the things silver lining. And I have a little bit civil, like at least you understand like why the failure and it depends how you react to it. Because there's a lot of jumpers who are kind of living in denial. Like it was not a fail, like it's not fail if no one talks about it and it's kind of trying to hide it and not carrying the responsibility. And I think the only way like failure doesn't exist is if you learn from it. And part of the learning process, if you carry your responsibility and then kind of learn honestly, even if you've done a mistake, which I've done many times in my failure, it's like, okay, well, I'm not going to do the same mistake again and I'm going to continue to try. So I've noticed that at least with failure, and I had also a little bit of a similar accident. Well, not similar, I didn't hit anything like a waterfall, but I did hit myself quite bad and it took me years to understand what was the silver lining in that. And for me, it was, I didn't get any footage because my good friends were not filming at that time. So I figured out in his head, he was like, okay, my waterfall flooded. I can have so much money if I get this cliff strike and like all the horror stories. So anyhow, it wasn't filmed, but it was also a horrible rescue story. And then like high inside, I was looking, that was the same thing. I just wanted to jump again. Like we were so focused. We were so deep in that kind of a tunnel, pushing hard, like as fast as we could do. So that's the first thought. Like I at least I'm fortunate I didn't have to stop jumping. But I did have to stop. It was such a horrible injury. I tore my ankle off and I haven't been able to run since. So for me, I think it was the only thing that stopped me from jumping. Like that was kind of I still had the show we were doing on CBS, so I was forced to jump. So that was before then. I was hiding my accident from feet, and I limped a little bit. So
no, you did a good job. No one would have known. I just think it's interesting when you guys are talking about failures like that. And again, we've discussed this before about in present days. I don't think people are getting to learn from failing because everybody, this whole concept of everybody gets a trophy, everybody wins. And I don't think people are having the opportunity to be forged in failure where they understand what it means to fail. And that when you know what it feels like to fail, I think that drives you to want to succeed more.
Well, it also teaches you how not to do things.
Yeah.
Like when they were making the first light bulb, they failed 100 times. And what they did is it was just 100 times how not to make a light bulb, and then eventually they kept going at it and they figured out how to make a light bulb. And it's like iiro, from what I've always gathered from that accident, the silver lining I saw almost right away was that I think it saved his life in the long run.
That's how I was just getting into. Because the wingsuit base jumping had just gotten so far, you were still pushing it. And had I not been hurt, I would have definitely been charging the castle and doing the most like crazy jumps that we were doing at the time. So for me, the silver lining was that I realized like 10 years later that, oh my gosh, so many of our friends continue to die around us. And then, that was the thing. The accident was that forced me. The universe told me like, stop. I didn't listen the first time. I got hurt also in Idaho afterwards, but then that was the necessary thing that forced to pull me back. And
and that's the thing. You had a lot of resilience because you came to visit me in the States 3 different years, and you broke your leg 3 different times. You came to visit me, broke your leg. Came to visit me next year, broke your leg. Came to visit me again, broke your leg.
And then you told him, "Don't come next year."
Well, no, it was fun. It's great. I keep coming. I don't mind. But it just showed iiro was getting hurt, and he kept coming back because he was incredibly resilient, and he just he wanted to continue, and I understood because I'm the same way. But I do think this last one was big enough, hard enough, heavy enough to where it finally dawned that it's like, I can't, it's going to kill me.
Yeah. And I'm also, besides resilient, I'm competitive. So like I went back to Finland to do my work and it was winter, I couldn't base jump. And Jeb just drives a few hours, jumps the bridge and he improves so much, goes to high diving and I show up like since the last trip and start jumping again with the same mentality and look and oh, behold, I got hurt again. But I wanted to do the same cool shit as you did, but I also paid heavy price for it.
Well, let me ask you guys, again, going back to the subject of the fear of failure. I mean, obviously you guys were able to take and overcome those fears, again, have the courage to overcome those fears and to accept the failures and grow on them. It seems like a lot of people are held back by the fear of failure. They don't even get to the fact of failing because they're scared to fail because there's been this whole negative connotation that when you fail, you're a loser, whatever name under the sun, people are so put down by failure, and then that fear creeps in because they think some asshole is going to put them down and label them something, not realizing that they can build upon that.
Well, I have quite a few friends who I've witnessed go through these iterations where they get into something really passionately, and then they start doing it, and then they never allow themselves to go very far because they quit. And you can see that they're quitting because they're scared that they won't actually succeed, and they're afraid of failing at it. And they don't realize that by stopping before you even really start, you have forced failure. And it's interesting. It's funny. I'm not a writer, but I wrote a book. And the reason I wrote a book isn't because I wanted to write a book, actually. My grandfather was the one who wanted to write a book. And when I was a little kid, my grandpa was always in his office writing his autobiography my entire life. So my entire life, he was in his office for hours. Every time I'd go visit, he was writing his book, And when he was 96 years old, he was on his deathbed without knowing it. And he was with my little sister, and she's like holding his hand. They're like talking stuff. And he said something to her that was very shocking to her. And then when she told me, shocked me. And it was, when I get home, I'm going to start that book. And we're like, what? And she's like, she told me, and I'm like, what? and he ended up dying like an hour later. And we started searching like through all of his papers, looking for stuff. And there was nothing, not one page written. And what I think happened is my grandfather was a spectacular writer. He wrote for magazines. He went to college for it. He went to Berkeley, got a degree in writing, and he would write a lot. But I think when it came to writing, he saw himself as like a Hemingway level writer. And I think as he was writing, his writing was never good enough for him. So he would write maybe 100 pages. It wouldn't be good enough. He didn't want anyone to read it. He'd throw it away, start over. And I think he spent his life just starting over his book again and again and again because he was scared that when he finally released it, that it wouldn't be at the level that he thought it needed to be. And he didn't realize that by not just writing and getting it out there, that was the failing. And when I realized that, I decided, you know what, I'm going to write a book. That's awesome. I'm actually going to do it. I'm going to complete it. And kind of for him, and I know I'm not a good writer. Like I wouldn't expect myself to. This is my first time doing it. Who thinks you're going to be a great writer the first time you do it? So I didn't have that same like fear holding me back. I could write the book, and it didn't matter if it was good, right? That wasn't the point. It turned out rad, but it didn't.
Yeah, it's great. You are a good writer.
It actually turned out to be a good book, but that's the point. I wasn't being held back by this idea that I had to be a Hemingway, right? Of course I'm not going to be Hemingway, nor would I want to be, right? And that's the thing. My grandfather had this focus on it had to be a certain thing, and if it wasn't that certain thing, he wouldn't do it. And that is failure in itself. And the what was it, Gretzky? 100% of the shots you don't go for don't go in. That is the definition of failure. And for me, I have this thing, and you said it kind of the same way I've always kind of felt it, is you don't fail if you don't give up, right? So you can go for something, and there's always going to be a barrier between you and what you want to do. Sometimes it's going to be people telling you that it's not possible. Sometimes it's going to be these fears inside yourself where you don't think it's possible. Sometimes it's going to be financial. Who knows? There's barriers between you and your goals always. And it's up to you to figure out ways to burn through those barriers, climb over those barriers, wrap around those barriers to get to that goal. And whenever I hear somebody say, oh, well, I tried, but it didn't work out. It's like, well, why are you still trying? Like, why did you give up? Why did you quit? Because only when you give up do you truly fail. Otherwise, you're just in the process of trying to make this happen. And every single time you hit one of those barriers, that's a learning lesson on how to get to where you're trying to get to. So that's why to me, failure doesn't exist unless you choose to give up on something. Then, and don't get me wrong, sometimes giving up's the right thing. Like there's been certain things that I've gone for that I thought were important, and I hit a barrier that finally is so brutal it breaks me, and I decided, you know what? That goal's not really worth it. And I actually do fail because I give up on it. I decide it's not worth it. I'm not doing it, But if it is important to me, then I don't give up on it. And then I will just keep hitting it. And there have been things that I've wanted to do that have taken me almost 2 decades to accomplish. Yeah. And I've gone at them again and again and again. And then eventually I get to it. But it has to be important enough. And I think that's the key, is finding things that are important enough that you're not going to give up on them. And then that's how you don't fail at things, is you just keep hammering away until you make it happen.
Yeah. I guess it's like the classic Rocky story. Rocky won, that would be. The goal wasn't necessarily to win. It was to go the distance. Yeah. And that was winning. Yeah. Which is great. The failing would have been quitting.
Yeah. And what's great about Rocky in that story is he goes the distance, which at that point was his winning. Yeah. Then the next one, his winning was to win.
Right.
And then he does. And that's the thing is these goals can move. They're malleable, and what is winning to you now or failing to you now may be different in 10 years from now or 5 years from now.
Right.
All of a sudden, a success may just be getting out of bed and being able to go to the bathroom by yourself. That might be your success.
Yeah.
Like for me now, my idea of the success is being able to go for a walk on the beach with the person I love. That's a successful day as far as I'm concerned. Back in the day, go back 15, 20 years, and success would have been jumping out of some helicopter flying through some mountain and almost dying and then somehow surviving it, and then that's a success, so these ideas change, but I think again it always comes back to this thing of like your purpose, your point, what is important to you, and then you're the only one who can define what your success and failure is. And if you feel like you're failing at something, well then keep going until you're not. And there's also the sayings of whether you think you can do something, you can't do something, you're right. You are correct. If you think you can't do something, well, then you're correct. You can't do it. If you think you can, then you can, and you will. And that's the thing is people are capable of much more than they really believe. And I think, again, this concept of like fear of failure, that's what really cripples people. And I've watched a lot of my friends get very crippled by this concept of, it has to be a home run. It has to be perfect. No, it doesn't. You just have to get it done. And if it's not great, then do better next time and then try again. And each time, each iteration, you'll learn more. And like you said, you learn from the failures. I've learned that my failures are the most important things that have happened to me because those are the things that have taught me.
Yeah, it's just interesting that failure just has such a negative aspect that follows it. But again, you explained, I liked your Abe Lincoln explanation.
Earlier,
yeah, which was interesting.
Yeah, he failed at everything until he became president.
Yeah,
his entire life was just one failure after another until he became president of the United States and one of the most consequential presidents that ended slavery. So,
and there's so many like examples. Like he's probably the best. Failing at that and then succeeding. But from the writers, like Stephen King offered like the Carrie book of like for 30 times, and it was rejected every time. J.K. Rowling, like the Harry Potter writer, like lived in poverty, single mother, like had a job, and then got refused, like rejected from anywhere, and in 5 years became one of the richest women in the UK. So there is there can be a lifetime of failure until everything clicks.
Yeah.
But that lifetime of failure has brought all this experience and
preparation.
And knowledge and preparation to do things right. So ultimately, every person in the world who's done anything significant that you've heard about has become master of learning how to deal with the failure and the fear of failure and the failures. So I think it's important when you're talking about fear of failure that it's a conversation that you have in your head yourself, and it's basically your own brain trying to convince you that you're going to fail, you're not good enough, and that's all caused by the lizard brain. Lizard brain. Yeah, amygdala. I think that.
Explain the lizard brain.
Yeah, well, lizard brain is the most primitive part of our brain. It's kind of a small part of the brain. It's size of like a walnut or something. It's small. It's the center of the brain, and that's basically lizard. So it's the most primitive. Like all it does is it tries to keep us safe, and it does a great job.
It's fight or flight.
Yeah, fight or flight.
Got it.
That's what it triggers. So it basically fights for flights or flight, risks everywhere and dangers, and then it sets these motions. But because our physical evolution hasn't been as fast as our other evolution, basically we don't have the same dangers. When we go out of the door, we don't have to worry about getting eaten by wolves or bears or anywhere. But that is that primitive reaction.
Right.
But now we have all these other things that set it off so many times throughout the day. So we constantly have these kind of warning bells from our brain that are telling us that things are dangerous and we're going to fail. And it's kind of a conversation, but it's important to understand where these kind of doubts come, and it's such our primitive survival reaction, and it's there, and it's done a great job of doing it, the job. But at the time, it works too well, so it keeps finding these threats, and it keeps basically shrinking our world and prevents of us trying anything new.
Well, it's interesting because the master at anything has failed more times than the beginners even tried. And I think that's a really important thing to understand. In order to become a master at anything, you have to have gone through failure many, many, many times to have learned the important lessons to become a master. And that goes for any career, any job, any sport, any activity, anything you do. So, a lot of guys who get into the sport now, I've been doing this for 30 years. And they'll talk about how we're old school and all this. It's dude, you don't even know what you don't know. What we've seen, what we've experienced, what we've been through, it's actually quite hilarious. You haven't even started yet, and they think they're ninja master gods. And you're just you wait, and especially when it comes to the concept of death and destruction and how dangerous this stuff is, they have no concept yet, but they will. Will.
I think it's an interesting thing when you guys start talking about base jumping. You talk about failure in base jumping.
Yeah.
Ooh, you don't get too many failures in base jumping.
What's funny about failure in base jumping, right? So the successful base jumper is alive, the failed base jumper is dead, right? And that's kind of the concept. And you go into this idea that, because there's this saying, I say you can't fail until you give up, right? And they're well, What if you die? And you're like, well, okay. So if I'm in the middle of something that's so important to me that I'm willing to sacrifice my life for it, right? And I'm going for this goal that could potentially kill me, and I'm giving everything I have to it, and then I die in the process of trying to make that real. To me, that's not a failure. That's a life well lived. And that's how a man should die. He should die in the pursuit of something that's so special and so spectacular that, you know, your death will be remembered and like basically resonate through friggin' history.
I was getting goosebumps.
But that's the point. To me, that's not a failure.
Yeah.
To me, that is a person living their life to its fullest, and they got taken out in the process of turning one of their biggest dreams into a reality. And to me, that's not a failure. Now, someone else might see it that way, but I do not. You know, and I can think of no better way for a man to die than that. Like that's, I hope that I die that way at some point in the future. It is in the pursuit of something massive, you know, and in the pursuit of something big, in the pursuit of something important. And this is the great thing about that is you're the only one who knows what's important to you.
Yeah.
And it's irrelevant if anyone else thinks it's important, right? It only matters.
Yeah.
Is it important to you, and are you willing to sacrifice your life to it, you know?
Well, that's a good way to frame things. I mean, when you kind of recalibrate your brain to think that way, it changes your perspective on failure.
Yeah.
And I think it's important. We talk about failure in sports, but in a work environment, I think it's important, like you said, how do we switch our brain to see like a failure as something as a part of the curve to become successful? And I think that's probably one thing that we can bring to our listeners is the fact, like, most important thing, how do you change your mindset? Because we always worry what can go wrong, what's for me to lose, is to switch for something like what is for me to gain from here. And I think like changing that just attitude of how you see yourself and your opportunities are going to open new doors and allow to do more things.
Like you said, I think when you reframe it that it's a positive aspect, it's such a strong building block.
Well, it can be a positive.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean,
it depends. It can be a positive. It's not automatically positive.
Failure isn't automatically positive. Sometimes it can be super negative, but this is the point. Even if it is super negative, it, like Iiro said earlier, and it's true, if you learn something from it so that you don't repeat the same mistake, because that's the thing. A lot of people who refuse to admit that they made a mistake or did something wrong, well, they haven't learned the lesson, so they're going to be doomed to repeat it again. So if you make a mistake and you have a failure, if that's what you want to call it, right, you have to understand what caused it. Like, why did this happen? What was the mistake that I made? How do I not repeat that in the future? So if you have a mistake or a failure of some kind and you actually do that process in your own mind of like, okay, this is negative. This is bad. There is no positive in any of this. So how do I prevent this from happening again? Then that knowledge is a stepping stone to making your life better in the future.
Right.
And that's where, you know, sometimes you can't get a silver lining out of something that's happened to you, but what you can do is hopefully learn from that so you don't keep the process repeating. Because a lot of people have the problem of falling into a pattern where they fail again and again and again and again, and they never learn because they never accept the fact that they made a failure or made a mistake, and they won't talk about it, they won't show it to anyone, they keep it completely like, nope, and they don't actually allow themselves the process of learning from it.
Right. Well, I guess failure is an interesting thing, too, when we're talking about it. Like, for an example, taking a project out in Hollywood, we're taking a script out. It goes around town, and you would deem something, if it doesn't get bought or picked up, you would deem that as a failure. Yeah. So if we reframe that as a failure, but we take that aspect that can either make someone pack their shit up and go back to Ohio or wherever they came from, or that person sticks around and then the word perseverance comes in. And those failures, we'll call them, that build that person to become resilient, where they just become fucking determined.
Well, what's great too with the script concept is it's good if that person gets a rejection and then asks why.
Yeah.
What is it?
Because then it's a feedback. It's not a failure. It's a feedback session, and it's not it's not yet.
Yeah. And what it does is you learn why it didn't work, why people didn't want it, and then you fix that in your next script. And then that goes out, and then it gets no's. And you're like, well, okay, why no on this one? And then you learn from why that was a no. And then hopefully by the third or fourth iteration, it's no longer a no.
Or 20th. Or the
30th or whatever it is.
Right. Or you look at it like, I think it was the Squid Game script. He didn't change it. He shopped it, because no.
And then it came to the right timing.
Exactly.
But that comes to if you know what you're doing is good.
Yeah.
Sometimes you do something that you know is good and just other people aren't ready for it yet. But sometimes you actually do suck. You know,
Exactly.
and you kind of need to know that, right? And you need to then, if you realize that you suck and people explain to you why you suck, and then you're like, oh, okay. I mean, that was the...
And if you set your ego out of the
Exactly.
wax, and if you're willing to take the whole like feedback of it, and then you don't get like personally insulted of your genius, that someone insults your genius.
But you know, it's weird. So many. I can't remember if I told you that it was on one of the shows. I think it was on the TNT show, and people were coming in and they were putting their tapes in and all this shit, and they're coming in to read some lines. And I was like, and I always want positive for people. I want people to come in and kick ass and be a really talented actor. And holy shit, man, I just kept going, do these people not know they suck? And like you said, I wanted to go, please be good and give constructive criticism. But I could see that the ego was there where they were just like, I kicked ass and I'm good. And I was like, wow.
Yeah,
you know, so there's a line between like confidence and arrogance sometimes.
So it's weird. I guess failure is again is an interesting subject.
Well, I tell you what, the Mr. Beast is a really remarkable like case in this, where he, you know, was 11 and of course he sucked and he knew he sucked and he started out sucking and he sucked for a really long time and he was well aware of it.
Yeah,
and he learned, like he would see what worked and what didn't work, and he studied what he was doing wrong and doing right. And he started focusing on what was working and eliminating what wasn't. And eventually, we all know who Mr. Beast is now, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a fascinating thing to listen to him talk about his process of how he became what he was, because he didn't come from anywhere. He was middle of America, nothing, you know, making videos about what 11-year-olds make videos about, you know? And then all of a sudden, here he is making $60 million a month? It's crazy what he's doing. But the point is you have to be able to, again, get yourself out of your own ego and understand that, you can't go into your first fight expecting to break people up. Right, you're gonna have to train, prepare. You're gonna get your ass kicked a few times. You know, that's just how it is, and this is just a metaphor for life in general. You know, everything you go into, you can't expect to walk into it being a ninja. It doesn't work like that. You need to actually train and learn, and you need to get jacked up and lose. You need to fail multiple times, many times, to then learn how to succeed. You know, and I think that's where people. That fear of failure cripples people so that they don't actually even try in the first place. And now. I mean, Generation Z, I mean, they don't want to get off the couch. They don't want to stop looking at their iPad or video game or whatever it is they're doing. They don't even want to try. And now, even in schools, it's like you said earlier, you know, everyone gets a trophy, and that's a pointless thing. You know, there's no point in having trophies at all. There's no point in even competing in the first place.
Right.
You know, so it's like, if that's going to be the case, well, then what are you even doing? Like, why are you even here? So you need to kind of change the whole paradigm where the person has to be, you know, they have to fail. Let the person fail. Let them fall. And then that will teach them. That's how you learn. I know for myself, that's how I learned everything.
And here in the end, I'd like to ask one question, like, what would you be your tip? Like, we talked about the lizard brain, and we talk about the voice that actually prevents you from trying and potentially failing, or definitely prevents you from succeeding because you don't even try. So if any of our listeners are battling at home and with inactivity, they just can't, they listen too much of that the lizard brain in their head. Like, do you have any tips or guides, like how to lift yourself out of that stage?
Go fail. And fail often. Fail all the time. Just keep going. Just fail and fail and fail and fail and fail. And then eventually learn and understand why you're failing. Ask the questions and start to get like why it's not working for you. And then make changes, make adjustments, and grow. I mean, that's what it's going to cause growing. But again, you're not going to be willing to do any of this until you decide what it is you actually want to do in the first place. It always comes back to this concept of what is your passion? What gives your life purpose? Why do you eat food, drink water, breathe oxygen? Why do you wake up in the morning? Why are you here? So that's the key, is figuring that out, right? And then be prepared to fail a lot on your way there, you know? Because once you figure out what you want to do, then it's okay to fail a few times on your way there. You're okay with it, you know? And then you're going to grow and grow and grow, and eventually you'll stop failing.
Awesome. Well, look, I have two requests here at the end. First thing is, can we please put together Jeb's greatest hits? I don't know why that I just like the idea of a greatest hits album. People would probably really like to see those failures. And then I think the second thing is just want to remind everybody to subscribe to the 3777 channel and to also go to the 3777 website. We have a bunch of cool exclusive merchandise that you can only get there. some of the interesting teas. They're all there, but check them out. Thank you, everybody, for listening and watching, and we will check you later.